chain-smoking bunny girls with paranormal psychic powers, impeccable art direction on all fronts, the likes of which still leave me shaken as I write this script, blade-wielding exorcists of esteemed Shinto priest families, and more bunny girls. Did I mention the bunny girls?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, good, just wanted to get that point across. My fellow weebs, prepare and beware, cause there's a new kid on the block and they're out to make a name for themselves with this one. Hiromi Ichikawa, author of 2 Rabbit Exorcists, is an artist with a debut so new, I'm surprised I was even able to find it in the first place, but boy am I glad that I did. Have you been in desperate need for some gory battles, genuinely good dialogue, spiritual nay-doers, insane paneling, or artwork so clever, so original and gorgeous that it so obviously will become a style people emulate in future series? Well, are you? Guys, if you're a little burned out on authors that hold your hand throughout the story, or hit you with those Yoshihiro Togashi-sized text walls, well, then I have the perfect medicine for you. What I offer is a peek into a world where style and substance fuse into one solid form. A world where honor and love are still regarded as the highest achievements of humanity. A place where ancient evils clash with modern-day settings, but most importantly, I offer you a manga where its creator knows fully well what they're doing in terms of storytelling, putting full trust in their audience without a whole lot of unnecessary plot explaining, with environmental storytelling and trippy panel direction being the name of the game here. Not to mention, it's beautiful and bloody and filled with bunnies. People, if you need another good seinen that isn't the usual list of Berserk, Vagabond, or Vinland Saga, then simply sit back and relax as I introduce to you all a series we all know is going to be a huge deal once it hits the mainstream audience. To talk to you all about 2 Rabbit Exorcists. To call Hiromi Ichikawa anything other than an enigma would be a complete understatement. Having popped up out of the blue a mere 3 months ago, Ichikawa has gotten right to work on what I can only hope will be a seinen masterpiece in the following years to come. Now, the first thing you might have noticed about this manga is its art style, and dear God, is it an art style. Not only does it lean towards a more realistic look, but Ichikawa draws with this rough, sketch-like style that gives each scene more lighting and detail to it. Where something like Q Hayashida style makes everything look dark and gritty, this style, on the other hand, is way more bright and vibrant, almost as if the scene is being lit with professional lighting. And because of this more bright look, Ichikawa's drawings have an insane level of detail to them. Take a look for yourself. Now, this isn't to say that everything in the manga is rough and sketchy, because it's not. Enemy designs, for example, are made to look simple and cartoonish, yet for good reason, as the complexity levels of these enemy designs directly correlate to how strong they are. These dudes right here are low-level baddies, but something like this, see how the design for it starts getting more intricate? That's how you know if a spirit is more dangerous or not. Another example of this is the constant use of this cartoonish style right here. I read a comment somewhere saying that this series simultaneously takes itself seriously and unseriously at the same time, and I couldn't agree more. The cartoonish, bubbly, almost Marshmallow Man style is used just as often as the main, more realistic style. You'd think it wouldn't work, but I actually really like it. It suits the tone perfectly. Also, tell me this style doesn't remind you of those stress balls the guidance counselor used to pass out in the hallways back in the day. Now, aside from surface level appearances, there's a whole lot more going on with Ichikawa's style, aside from the god tier originality. Normally, in these more mature series, there comes this pitfall that many authors will succumb to in order to keep eyeballs on their pages. And that pitfall is called fan service. Of course, since seinen is made for an older audience, you're of course going to be getting more sexualized characters or ecchi or whatever you want to call it, but the way 2 Rabbit Exorcists handles this is near flawless. I don't think there's a single use of fan service or excess nudity in this thing at all. But what about the bunny girl, you may be asking? Well, there's actually a reason behind that. Yes, having bunny girls in anything is a plus, but in the story, Uruka is actually a bartender at one of those bunny clubs. She doesn't just wear this outfit for no reason. Ichikawa could have totally pulled what Atsushi did with Fire Force, but no. The angles at which Ichikawa draws Uruka are never for the purpose of giving people a cheap thrill. I think there's literally one singular scene where you see her butt, like that's it. And you just know that most authors in this case would have been spamming that shit throughout if given the chance, but not Ichikawa. In fact, all of the character designs have some thought put behind them. Gotsuji, for example, the other protagonist of the story, wears these old-timey robes despite it being modern times. Sure, he's a Shinto exorcist, yeah, but most of the other ones don't wear that stuff. In fact, one dude wears a completely different kind of bunny outfit, also serving its own purpose. The reason for Gotsuji's outfit is more to show his dedication towards the craft, but more importantly, his dedication to a specific person. But enough glazing the artist here, what is Two Rabbit Exorcists even about? Well, the story of Gotsuji and Uruka is one that starts long before the opening of the first chapter of this manga. Their story begins some years ago. Childhood friends from way back, held together by a girl named Iruka and bound forever by her untimely death. You see, the three of them, the three people I just mentioned, all hail from Shinto priest families. Shrine families, if you will, but most importantly, exorcist families. Exorcist, tasked with upholding the safety of all humanity from evil spirits. I know, very original, right? But where Two Rabbit Exorcists separates itself from other series with a premise similar to this is in its character writing and attention to detail. Let me explain. Every aspect of this manga has been meticulously crafted by Ichikawa's Da Vinci-like hands with some sort of purpose in mind. All of it has. The enemy designs have a purpose based on the level of complexity to them. Cleverly drawn scene transitions have purpose to them by explaining to us, as the reader, how certain attacks or powers work. Even the individual outfits worn by everyone have some purpose to them, being more than simply fan service or a silly afterthought. And nowhere is this more true than with the character's purpose. Iruka was the older sister of Uruka. Her death was a blow not only to her, but Gotsuji as well. More so even, as he had always been closer to Iruka compared to her younger sibling. Iruka, who had always shown compassion and kindness towards others, was always destined to become an exorcist, making it her life goal to help as many people as possible before she died from her illness. This, however, would never happen. While on a difficult mission, Iruka was cut down prematurely by a powerful spirit by the name of Ikomiki, a spirit which mysteriously disappeared thereafter. Now, while both Gotsuji and Uruka too were training to become fully fledged exorcists, and at this point were, it wasn't until Iruka's death when the two had decided whether they commit their lives to the craft or not, with Uruka running away to the city, trying to move on as much as possible, while Gotsuji stayed behind to become a force to be reckoned with. Out for revenge against all spirits, but more importantly, he was out for Ikomiki's head. The next time these two friends would see each other would be in the hospital some years later, as Gotsuji recovered from injuries sustained from fighting spirits. And it's here where Uruka started tagging along with Gotsuji once more, eventually setting up their own unsanctioned paranormal investigation service, one that will later get them into trouble, but we'll touch on that later. Now begins the first chapter of Two Rabbit Exorcists. So our story begins with Gotsuji and Uruka here investigating this ginormous traditional inn way outside of town. Apparently those flyers they set up are finally paying off, as now they have an old lady in need of some spiritual removal. And get to removing they do, slicing their way through spirits big and small, no matter the size. Now, while Uruka has a badass katana of her own, Gotsuji is the one who does pretty much all the heavy lifting in terms of spirit slaying. Uruka's part is more for the finding of the spirits. Well, that and smoking cigarettes everywhere. Compared to the two of them, she's always been better at seeing and sensing these things, though she's perfectly capable of handling a blade just fine. Together like this, they form the perfect team. One sensing while the other exercises. Seems easy enough, right? Throughout the building are dozens of these things. Lesser spirits of all kinds, resembling more cartoons than actual apparitions, coming in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but it doesn't stay cute for long, as all of the spirits present quickly morph into this uber spirit, a big ol' chunky boy. Something cool I wanted to point out real quick is how clever the paneling is. Like, the use of simple spirit designs covering the page like this is so damn cool. I'm such a nerd for this kind of stuff. And you're gonna see tons of talented panel use in the manga throughout. Anyway, the giant spirit, though scary looking to us, is quickly sliced to pieces by Gotsuji, blood and viscera raining from the sky. With so many spirits gathered in one place, it begs the question, why? Why are there so many here? Well, apparently, in the innkeeper's past, her husband was being threatened by some people who unknowingly stayed at their inn. Here, they were all poisoned individually by the innkeeper. And since evil spirits are nothing more than masses of resentment formed from bundles of grudges, well, this place was soon swimming with them. But thanks to our two exorcists here, now that's a thing of the past, ending the case as they head back home for hamburgers. Our duo's next case would come in the following days for a hospital somewhere in the city. Apparently the people on the night shift have been hearing footsteps and have contacted the two to solve it. On the way to the hospital, however, Gotsuji decides to make a quick detour, saving a small child from being attacked by a lesser spirit. The way he does this is so dope too, like 1 second he's there and the next, poof, teleported. Off to go slice the thing up. It's beyond badass. After taking the time to calm the kid down, we learn that not only does Haruto here have the ability to see spirits like they do, but there's also a spirit in his house who physically abuses his mother, presumably sending her to the very hospital they were here to investigate. Once learning this info, Gotsuji decides to split the group up in two, with him dealing with the hospital while Uruka investigates the boy's house. After all, the threat at the hospital is an unknown one and should be the greater threat. Shouldn't it be? Once Uruka gets to the house, she discovers that the mom Haruto was talking about was actually just a box. It's a display box for a cremation urn, or maybe like the mom's ashes are inside the box itself. I'm not too sure how they do it in Japan, but we know for sure that the mom is dead. So then why is the boy claiming a spirit is still hitting her? Well, from out of the corner of the ceiling, this absolute bowling ball of a specimen comes flying at Uruka, wielding fists of fucking fury, throwing her across the room like a rag doll and kinda making her wish she was the one who took the hospital. Regardless, this is the guy. Haruto points out, this is the thing that's been hitting his mother despite her already being dead. Like this thing disrespects her even after life. It's actually really messed up when you think about it, and traumatizing to the kid as well. Despite Uruka not possessing the strength to defeat this spirit, she doesn't think about giving up at all, using herself as a human shield / punching bag as she tries to get the kid to safety. Until... What the? I'm not expecting visitors. Are you expecting anybody? And bam! Here comes Gotsuji, ready to save the day, slicing and dicing his way around, but not before interrogating the spirit first about Ikomiki. Of course, he has no idea, leaving the exorcist but one option: to extinguish his life in yet another badass use of paneling design. And with this, hopefully, Haruto can now exist a little more peacefully. Or at least as peacefully as an orphaned boy can. Like I said, it's a seinen, so the subject material is always going to be a little darker and more mature, but it's still a bit of a downer, even though they help him. After this encounter though, the pair gets a call from Hata, another exorcist wanting them to all meet up. And since it's an old associate of Iruka's and they sound pissed, the two of them make their way over as fast as possible. This is Hata, and he's from the main temple. The same temple overseeing all the exorcists, but more importantly, they're the people who enforce centuries worth of unspoken rules, boundaries, and territories. By setting up their own paranormal investigation service, Gotsuji and Uruka here have effectively gone and spit in the main temple's face, hence why Hata is here. As punishment for this, the group is tasked with the disposal of a Gashadokuro, those giant skeleton yokai you see in Edo period art. Seeing as the creatures are incredibly tough, large, and powerful, the task is essentially a suicide mission for their disobedience. But then again, the main temple has been keeping an eye on Gotsuji here. If he does somehow manage to defeat this spirit, then maybe, just maybe, there's a chance the main temple will give him some info on Ikomiki. Maybe. It's a mental tactic Hata uses to provoke the exorcist into actually doing it. And with this information, he's off. Gotsuji sets off, leaving Uruka and Hata behind on top of this building. You can already see the Gashadokuro's head forming here in the clouds, before it starts slowly siphoning spirits from all corners of the city. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them, in fact, all collecting, all coagulating into the bony pieces that would become the giant's body. Such a cool way for the spirit to form, and such a horrifying display as well. I mean, look at this thing, it's off-putting as hell, immediately going on the offensive as it tries to gnaw and chew its way through our three exorcists. Luckily for them, it isn't incredibly accurate. Unluckily for them though, it causes so much destruction that now pieces of building rubble begin falling to the ground, potentially endangering hundreds of people below. In the usual selfless Gotsuji fashion, he takes it upon himself to single out the spirit's attacks while the other two deal with the falling debris. Though it's a plan no one can object to, as the guy immediately takes out his earpiece and goes full anime protagonist mode here, weaving in and out of the giant's bony, snake-like body. It's honestly an incredibly dope action sequence. The Gasha Dokuro slams its weight around the city, but Gotsuji hangs in there like a badass, deflecting its attacks, hitting it back in return. The one thing he can't do, however, is get an opening on the creature. Hata telling him to fall back so that Uruka can create that opening for him using this technique called the Wisdom of Manjusri, which, by the way, is an actual proverb and a bodhisattva people worship in real life. Anyway, in this case, the ability essentially distracts the spirit, getting it to look in her direction so that Gotsuji can cut out its eyes. Again, another really cool sequence that explains what's going on without having to explain what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, the imagery and the paneling carries so much storytelling inside of it that it doesn't need a verbal explanation. I find it amazing. But yeah, after the spirit gets its eyes cut out, it starts freaking out, spiraling out of control and destroying everything in its path. Though it doesn't take long for Gotsuji to finish it off by exorcising it for good, finally putting a stop to its rampage and making fools out of the main temple in the process. I guess they weren't expecting him to actually do it. As the three exorcists leave the area, we see a figure watching them from the buildings above. Who this is, well, we'll get into that shortly, because first we gotta see what our exorcist friends here are up to. So after the battle, and with Gotsuji in hospital to recover, Uruka and Hata go out for drinks and yakiniku to blow off some steam. Here, we get a little pity party about how she thinks she isn't good enough to measure up to her sister, we learn about Hata's obsession with slot machines, but most important to the story, we learn about humanoid spirits. After Gotsuji sneaks out of the hospital and joins back up with them, Hata fills them in on the knowledge that if given enough time, spirits can evolve more than just their external forms, but their internal ones as well. Over the course of this evolution, powerful spirits will begin to slowly inch towards resembling human beings until eventually they do. And by that point it's too late, as humanoid spirits are the hardest ones to deal with. This is presumably what Iruka's killer was due to its strength. Scary stuff aside though, the group actually has a good time here at yakiniku, and for once in the manga, there's a genuine moment of happiness. Drinks are being had, food is being eaten. After all the things we just got done seeing, we finally have some peace. However, as the three begin leaving the restaurant and saying their goodbyes, something slices through Hata so fast, so quickly, that he even manages to finish his sentence before falling over dead, decapitated. His head now in the hands of something rather human-looking. And that's where I'm stopping the synopsis for you guys. I've only spoiled 6 of the 10 chapters here, and I'd rather you go read the rest of it for yourself. Hiromi Ichikawa has worked way too hard to have all of 2 Rabbit Exorcists spoiled by some guy on the internet. Please, go and read the manga for yourself. I guarantee you'll thank me for it. I absolutely adore 2 Rabbit Exorcists. This manga was made by a manga lover for manga lovers. There's no hand-holding in this, no wasting the reader's time. References to other manga and manga tropes are littered throughout. It's obviously made by someone who loves this medium, not just someone who excels in it. And boy, oh boy, do they excel in it. I know it's bad to compare artists' work to one another, but in order for me to describe to you how I feel when reading this thing, I'll need to use some references to make some sense of myself. For starters, the enemy designs in this manga give off a sort of Inua Asano feel to them. Strictly in the visual sense though. It's not to say that Ichikawa writes like Inuo, I just mean that the contradicting art styles you see in panels like this gives it a sort of pun-pun feel at times. You never see that in gory mangas like this. Also, the rough lines and sketch-like style reminds me almost of a fusion between Kyu Hayashida and Yamada Akihiro, with paneling so good it would make Kiichi Koike proud. It's a style I don't think I've ever seen presented like this. Like I said earlier, Hayashida's rough style makes stuff look dark, but this sketch style looks way more bright and vibrant. It's absolutely gorgeous. Another thing I found gorgeous were the flashbacks intertwined throughout. Everything I explained at the beginning of the synopsis was all weaved together in flashbacks throughout the story, though the term flashback itself isn't the right word. The scenes blend together to make it more dreamy, I'd say. And in some scenes even, the places where people had previously been overlap with each other and you have cool moments like this one. Scene transitions as well share that same level of cleverness and thoughtfulness behind them. Look at these, look at them, they're so good. Also, despite the story being very mature, it doesn't rely on ecchi at all. Contrary to what you might think at first glance, there are zero titties popping out, no unnecessary sexuality. You're not gonna have Uruka here being this dumb bimbo bouncing around, none of that. And it's so refreshing to see. Ichikawa is an artist that takes their story seriously. Holy shit, who would have guessed people like that are still around? The focus is always on the quality of the story, nothing else. They don't need cheap tricks just to get you entertained or to hook you. Something else I wanted to add real quick was that there's an alternative chapter 1 called chapter 1.5, but it's not too different from the first chapter we get in the manga. There's a few visual changes or dialogue changes here and there, but the biggest change that I honestly wish they kept in was how they killed that big spirit at the beginning. In the original chapter 1, we just see Gotsuji slice through it, but in the alternative version, the two exorcists actually team up and take this thing down. And the way that the panels go from having pictures in them to transitioning into the cuts dealt on that spirit was just mwah, chef's kiss. I really wish Ichikawa kept this panel in because it looks so fucking good. And it makes the buddy dynamic stronger in my eye, but whatever. At least we get to admire this picture, even if it isn't in the official chapter 1. But there you have it. That's everything I had for you on 2 Rabbit Exorcists. The seinen I believe looks the most promising this year. As always, I've linked the socials below, and please, for the love of God, go show Ichikawa some love over on Twitter and the manga reading app. I don't know how long this thing is going to stay low-key for, but it's only a matter of time before it absolutely explodes in popularity. Until the next video, guys, I'll see you then.